Hello and welcome again to another episode of One Starfish, where our mission is to help change the world one starfish or one person at a time. As always, guys, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, share. That's how we get the word out about what we do. I'm excited for our guest today, Nanci Beyerl and I. This is the first time we've officially met. She's in the horse industry, which I was in, of course, for 17 years. Started Peaceful Acres, which is a horse rescue, in 2007. She's also a John Maxwell certified coach and social worker. So she integrates that in with the horses and helping people, which is pretty cool. She's also just wrote a book called In Search of Purpose, which will have the links in the show notes. Thanks for being on, Nanci.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. This is exciting. Just got in from feeding the horses and jumped on this, and I'm grateful.
That's awesome. So let's go into what kind of started you down the horse world. And we talked a little bit before in 2002, we had some traumatic events, and horses basically you said saved your life. So give us a little bit more of history on that.
All right. Well, thanks. Yeah. So the short version is, I had horses and showed them, and I guess was a little bit of the normal, woman craze with her horses and her kids, and went to shows and had a great time. Had a pretty successful construction company with my now ex-husband. And in October of 2002, I was able to get out of that marriage with an order of protection. I moved into a small 12-acre farm with my 4 horses, my 2 dogs, and my 3 kids part-time. And I literally say that in the stable, my horses saved my life. And what I mean by that is what I have now based my entire career and life off of, is what happens when we can regulate more stability in our lives, be in nature, have purpose, give ourselves reason to live and to be serving others. And what I found was equine assisted psychotherapy and learning, and equine assisted or facilitative coaching. And I've dedicated my life since 2004 is when I started graduate school. So I guess since then in doing this work.
So obviously you just kind of skipped over some stuff there. Let's get into a little bit deeper. How long were you married and what caused you to actually take the step to get out? And, what would you give for words of wisdom to maybe someone that's listening to this that might be in something similar?
Wow. So I was married for 15 years. And as I said, we were pretty successful. Our company was doing well, but we had a lot of, personal issues and a lot of struggles. And it was getting worse, and I was losing myself. It was pretty terrifying to be home. And I knew that my kids and I needed to be safe as he was going through his own issues, his own mental health issues and cognitive issues and addiction issues. So I just remember one day sitting on my couch and calling my mom. And I said, I've got to get out. I got to get my kids and I safe. And my mom said, well, what are you talking about? So nobody knew. And I think that that's oftentimes what happens is you don't know what's happening behind somebody's doors.
Mm-hmm.
I was a very good actress. I could keep on working and we could keep on building the business until it just all really came to a, close to disaster, state police and that type of stuff showing up at the door. So I was fortunate in that I had enough of a safety net. I had gone to domestic violence meetings and the shelter. It was not going to be for me and my kids, and luckily my family had some resources, but I couldn't own anything. It would become more marital assets. So that was a big hurdle. And I think sometimes when you're at that income level of you do have assets, there's other things that come into why you don't leave, You got a business together. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen to the business? All these different thoughts. What's going to happen to the kids in private school? Well, none of that matters really. Your life matters. And that's, I guess, what it came to is my life mattered. My kids' lives mattered. But then it was about 2 years of a horrific, horrible custody battle where he knew the only thing I wanted was my kids. And I believed that it took both of us to bring them into this world, and it would take both of us to raise them properly. But it was the one thing he could do to strip me of any hope. And he went after me completely. Somebody that hadn't even gotten a traffic ticket, was a stay-at-home mom, plus ran a business that was a family business with my kids there in the office and whatnot. So it was pretty devastating. I found battered women's groups that were very helpful. But in some ways, I just really needed to lean in on my faith and on God and what my purpose would become. And in a snowbank, literally in a snowbank, God's voice came to me and I was crying and I said, I can't do it on my own. He's right. I'm not going to make it. And God's voice came over to me and said, get up. Don't do that again. Just keep on walking. You keep on trusting, move forward. And it was then that I walked into my barn. I had no running water, electricity, or anything in there. And walked with 2 buckets in my hands to the barn to bring water to the horses. And that's when it started. That's when my heart knew that the purpose for my farm and for me was to help people and help horses together. So been doing it a long time now. And I'm grateful and my kids are great. My kids are all grown and getting ready to start doing some business with my oldest son, who's an engineer, and really lucky and thankful he's gotten started out on his own. And
So did you lose your kids then for a period of time?
I didn't lose them through custody. I had them through custody, but I couldn't get them. So he had alienated them and estranged me. It's called parental alienation. And
My best friend's dealing with this.
I'm sorry. It's horrible. It's part of why I have retreats here now at Peaceful Acres. I have accommodations. I do women's retreats. Why I wrote my book. Took a long time for me to say, you know what, I can help other people who are being alienated from their kids. It's a true sickness. It's a mental health issue. My thesis basically for my master's degree was on parental alienation and estrangement, and what happens in these highly toxic custody battles, where it might not be that you end up dead physically, but you end up stripped of anything and everything that matters to you. And as a parent, that's typically your children. So when your perpetrator, when your abuser goes after your kids, you also know that your kids are not safe. But there's a crazy making in it. And so when you show up at court, it's very hard they're very oftentimes very manipulative and very crafty and can control themselves very, very well. I learned a lot. So anyhow, that's how I started my organization, and my dogs just started barking. Sorry.
I hear them.
So I'm to do the work that we do, and I hope that in the years to come, my farm is really a big place now. It's not that 12-acre farm anymore, and we've been supporting a lot of people, mostly women and kids, keep acres. So no, I can't.
I know, Bobby.
Huge protection dogs as well.
I love that. So I just think this is such a big thing, because this is such a big thing in whatever. So in that 15 years, obviously it started getting violent by what I'm gathering physically. But did it start out that way? Like, what are some signs like that someone could watch for in their own situation that maybe they could get out of something before it gets violent?
Yeah. So I think before there's violence, there's certainly the power and control wheel. And I tell people, go, all you got to do is Google the power and control wheel. And if those things are seeming like they're in your life, you're no longer able to enjoy social outings with people. Uh, your finances are being controlled. Your Oh, there's just so much. Before there's any violence, there's a manipulation of almost every aspect in your life. When it comes to your children, you might be getting kind of alienated or estranged from them before you even realize it's happening. Like, oh, I've got this. I'm going to bring this one to an activity, and no, you don't have to come. Or the kids really didn't want you to come to this, so maybe you can just sit this one out. Yeah, and it starts to kind of be it's so gradual in some ways. These are people that their spouse or your partner that you trust, and also a lot of times they're incredibly giving and charismatic. My husband was very giving, very charismatic. We were both entrepreneurs. We were both that kind of, A-red personality with our business, get it done, grow it big. He had a traumatic brain injury that I had helped him recover from, and leaned in on alcohol actually as one of his, self-medicating um, things. So
Right.
the alcoholism kind of got into him even more. It became even more irrational. So there's so much to just watch out for. If you start to feel like little pieces of yourself are getting notched out, you're no longer feeling as social as you were. You're no longer feeling as confident as you were. You're making excuses for why you aren't going to things as a family or even alone. Maybe you're no longer going to church, or maybe he's using God against you. That happened to me a lot. He'd say, you can't lie. God wouldn't be pleased with you, and that this is what you're thinking about doing. And I go, no, I'm not. Like, yeah, you know that's what's in your heart. I'm in very twisted kind of stuff, and that's how personality like that can also very easily manipulate children to believe that they're not safe, or
Right.
parent doesn't love them. Like in one way, I had to get a part-time job because I had to pay for my horses, and he wouldn't pay me in my company. And so he'd tell my kids, your mother, values money and her horses more than family activities. And, she's working on today, it's Saturday, and she's working. She doesn't have to, but she's choosing money over you. And, little kids
Wow,
now.
they have some money mindset stuff they have to work through on that one. Holy. Well,
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot to it. But I would go to the barn, and that's where I would be able to be, emotional, and be able to just kind of work it out physically too. I think there's a great deal to say with when we're feeling depressed and anxious and overwhelmed, fatigued, that when we can use our physical bodies. I did 75 hard, and I think of winter very differently since I did 75 hard. The whole mental capacity piece of what we can do with our bodies, and to grow our strength and our fitness, full body fitness. So.
so interesting listening to this. Like, you kept your horses when you're saying that. Now, a lot of people would have sold their horses because they would have taken that manipulation seriously, and not that you weren't, but like differently, I guess you could say. Where do you think, and I'm really glad you didn't, because that was your strength. Where do you think that self-confidence, like, And you're talking about how he was talking to you, and how he was manipulating you. Where did your self-confidence, you think, come from that while you let him take a lot of control, you didn't let it, you still were doing stuff that I know a lot of women in those situations would have quit. So, or guys, if it's a twisted, it goes both ways. But where do you think that self-confidence, is that something you got from, or self-belief, whatever you want to call it, is that something you got from like your childhood and it kind of just stayed there? Like, where do you think that is? And how could people maybe grow that muscle in their kids if you think it came from childhood in their kids? So if a woman gets in that situation, I'm going to say, well, I'm being stereotypical here, obviously, but male, whatever, that they still keep something even though they get bashed down. I just find that interesting because I know some people that have been in those kind of situations as you described it, and they would have like sold, they wouldn't be working. They wouldn't be doing those things. They would have had the control enough. They'd have been like, okay, fine, I won't chase money. Like they would have taken that kind of thing. Hello, puppies.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So, first of all, I have a great deal of faith. So while I was going through everything, actually a friend of mine and her husband had picked me up to bring me to church. And that was in the late 90s. And so that was certainly helpful. My family, my mom and dad were incredibly supportive and helpful, but also didn't understand, why would I leave? There was too much at stake. We had too much, what was I doing? Can I do something to kind of appease him? But I think growing up, I also grew up that I had to work hard. We were, my dad was a lawyer, and he had an attitude of his kids needed to work. From the time you're young, you're out there and you're doing something. And my mother was also a hard worker, but also based in service. So volunteerism and giving back to community. So I think those two things created, or all of those things created a good, strong value system in me, which have learned a lot more about those values corporately too, and how important it is to make sure that that's within my organization. But I don't know. There was no way I was going to quit. I mean, there was times I wanted to die. I truly, I would wake up in the morning and say, this hurts too much. I can't do it another day. And my mother would, I'd be on the phone with my mom and she'd say, get going and go out and feed your horses and, stop talking like that. And I'm sure my mother would then bawl her eyes out, because my mother also, at that point, my parents couldn't see their grandkids. And they were all very, very close. It's probably the one thing that has caused a big struggle for my kids, is they lost that time with their grandparents, who are now have passed away. So I think with my programs, teaching people how to be resilient, teaching young people how to be resilient. Life hurts. Things are hard. We get sick. We have losses. I had a couple autoimmune diseases. I was like, all right, what do I have to do to get through these? Quitting was never an option, even though I wanted to some days. I was scared. I was intimidated.
Mm-hmm.
It was a glimmer of hope. And I would hold on to that. I had some great mentors. I ended up getting a job working for an industrial park, and I was their construction administrator. So I really, I was in my lane at that point, and he was great, because I used to bid work to him to the park. And so he was incredibly helpful in that if I needed time, I could have it. If I was having a tough time at work and I needed to talk to my lawyer, or I needed to get to a therapy appointment, or I needed to see my mom, he was great. And I had that flexibility. So I think for anybody that's going through tough times, being able to make sure that you're in a setting that you have some flexibility to heal. Surround yourself with really good, positive people who authentically love you, because at that point, you're not trusting many people, because the one person that you trusted the most is now going after you, or has been going after you, and whittled you down to nothing, right? Have some mentors, have a great therapist, have an incredible coach. That's why I done my master's degree in social work. And also I'm a life coach, because I believe the blend of the two. Of course, I do it with horses. My horses are incredible facilitators. And
Right.
so
That's
I think I answered the question in a whole lot of words.
No, that's good. Like I said, I think a lot of people are going, go through this, and it starts out emotional, and then, I mean, and then it gets physical. And I think the emotional can be just as bad as the physical, anyway, either way. Because sometimes scars are on the inside and they take longer to heal than on the outside.
Yeah, a lot of the work that I did, and working with women, and also within various different groups that help people who are going through domestic abuse, and the threat of physical harm is typically there. The emotional abuse, and the stripping someone of their capacity to even care or love themselves, is perhaps what stays longer than the broken nose, the broken arm, the bruised face, whatever. In my situation, it was more of a threat of physical harm, and times that my kids would stand up to him and say, that's my mom. You can't talk to her like that. And I remember on, a couple of occasions, him grabbing my kids, especially my son, and tossing him, to the side. And that to me was more horrifying than probably anything, because as my son was like, trying to stick up for me, he then, retargeted onto him. And at that point, I knew also that if things started to escalate, I bring it way down. So I learned, and maybe that was through my life with horses. You've been with horses, so that if you escalate, then the energy raises, and there's no way you're going to be able to work with these beings. So I think my life with horses probably helped me to navigate, what do I do when he has escalated so high, and that he could be incredibly dangerous to me. And I just, there were times I didn't shut up, believe me, but it got to the point that I would just bring it way down, and try and avoid him, or maybe take the kids and go and do something.
Was it a lot of times when he was drinking? Was it related to, like you said, that was a thing? Is that something that was tied a lot together, was the alcoholism along with the abuse?
Yeah, actually, I've told people, and I say this kind of not joking, but some people that have gone through it can understand, is if somebody's drinking and they say something to you that's hurtful, you can say that was the alcohol speaking, or that was behavior because of the alcohol. And in some ways, the alcohol, and the rage that would come through the alcohol was easier for me to handle, didn't break my heart as much as if he was sober and would say it. And plus, if he was sober, he was highly manipulative. He's a very, very smart man. And he was very targeted and very specific in what he was going to do and how he was going to do it. So the alcohol made him more sloppy, actually.
Right.
And sometimes not able to get out of his own way, because he couldn't walk. So in some ways,
Yeah.
some wasn't as dangerous because,
Yeah. Incapacitated.
incapacitated because of the alcohol, sure.
Yeah.
But you never know what's going to happen because they're completely not in the right mind at all at that point.
Right.
So that's when people do things that they don't remember doing. They're blacked out and they do things. So that was definitely when I knew, I need to get out. I need to get my kids safe because he could do something,
Right.
realizing what he was going to do, and
Right.
yeah. So
Wow. So, yeah. So then you went out. What made you want to start a Peaceful Acres? Tell us about where that came from, and obviously getting started in a nonprofit and horse rescue and stuff is not exactly easy or cheap. So tell us a little bit about the journey.
yeah, you just nailed it. It is not easy. It is not cheap. Well, I was on a magazine cover with one of my horses in 2007 after I graduated with my master's degree, telling the story of what I wanted to start here in the Capital Region in New York of partnering horses and people together for emotionally supportive programs, right? And a lawyer actually had seen it at one of the larger national law firms, but they've got a big office here in Albany. And he interviewed me and said, I think you should start this. You should have a not-for-profit organization. And I was like, great. And then they said, we're going to do that for you pro bono because we really believe strongly in what you're going to do and that this is needed. And it was new. It was completely new concept back in 2007. And so anyway, I had never taken a business course. I didn't know anything about nonprofit business leadership. I had never taken a leadership course. I was a social worker, and I loved horses. So over the years, it's just evolved. And as Ed Milet and Andy talk about, when we're casting our visions and we're really believing and imagining, what does it look like? What does that look like? And I have done that very well, I think. From I want to have yurts and I want to have accommodations to I've got yurts and we've got accommodations. Did it happen overnight? Kinda, but then not. We've got 156 acres now. We have camping. We have harvest hosts, motorhomes, guests come in. It's all part of fundraising, and also people friend raising. The organization is a not-for-profit. Any business, being an entrepreneur is hard. Most days you wake up and you're so excited for it, and at the same time you might want to quit. So but every morning I feel grateful and I feel blessed. I live the life that I choose to live. It doesn't mean that it's easy. The success I have is in the lives that we've saved and changed. It's not in money in the bank account. It's not in a fancy car. It's not in a lake house. But it's in fulfillment. It's in legacy. It's knowing that if it was all over tomorrow, I did what I chose to do since 2007, and was fulfilled despite it being difficult. I love to help people to start, looking into what is their purpose? How can you become fulfilled and live your life that you're excited for it every day, even if it's tough. Life is tough anyway. We might as well love what we do. All right. So I help women start businesses who are successful. I've helped people to go, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do in my life as they're getting close to retirement, finding that that's something that inspires them. And yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, I know we could go forever, but I'm watching the time. We'll probably have you back on. I always, guys, definitely reach out. We'll have all of the information, Peaceful Acres, book, all the things in the show notes. I know you want to check this out and reach out. Yes, if you're on YouTube, check out. She's got it. She's holding the book. The horses on it. Looks cool. I love it. In Search of Purpose. And wrapping up, I always have 3 final questions, and then anything that we didn't touch on that you think would be really impactful for our listeners. So first and final question, interesting enough, I think you'll have a saying on this. What's one sentence, if someone's looking for their purpose, what's one sentence you would say that could help them find their purpose?
Ooh, release your doubts, release your self-judgment and doubts. And if you were to really think about yourself and dream about what you're doing that brings you peace and fulfillment, there's your purpose.
Awesome. Second one, what's a favorite quote and why?
Oh, jeepers creepers. I am so bad at remembering things. You know what? They're all in my book. So let's see. Okay, here we go. The comfortable road will never lead you to the person you're destined to be in your life. Ed Milet. Yeah, there's a good one.
Third and final question, what's one word or sentence you would want in your gravestone?
She did it.
Like that. All right, you run into someone in the coffee shop and they're like, Nanci, that was amazing. I got out of a bad situation and I'm starting to look for my purpose and follow my heart and all the things we talked about, which I think was really cool. What's something we didn't touch on today that you think would be really impactful for our listeners?
Yeah, I think that when we're losing hope and when we're feeling really down, is find that 1 or 2 people that get you, that love you, authentically love you, that are there almost like the bumpers if you're bowling. And they're the ones that are going to keep you in your lane because they know you enough that they're not going to let you lose it, And if you do lose it, you're safe with them to fall apart, right? You don't need a whole lot of people. You just need that core few people in your life. And as we get older, that's what we find anyhow, as we get into our 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, our core group of people that really love us and that we really love them gets smaller. And it's that richness,
Love that. Awesome. Guys, I know you'll want to share this, so make sure to share this. Make sure to rate, review, subscribe, reach out to Nanci if you have any questions on anything we talked about. She'd be happy to help. We can go out there. If we can help one person or one starfish at a time, together, we can change the world. Thanks for being on, Nanci.
Thank you, Angela.